Let's stick with politics. I want to bring in Francesca Chambers, White House Correspondent over at McClatchy DC. Good to see you, Francesca. I want to get your reaction to President Trump's taped statements about the coronavirus to Bob Woodward. You know, Megan brought up the very good point. He is Teflon Don. A lot of big, serious allegations have come out against President Trump. Even just a week ago, The Atlantic had their bombshell story about President Trump. So is this the thing that finally does President Trump in when it comes to the election?
Well, these were on tape and recorded, and I cannot overstate that in terms of the importance, because with the Atlantic story, President Trump and the White House administration were able to run away from that and say that, look, we have all these people on the record who were in France, who were around the president, who say that this did not happen, whereas with this, Kayleigh McEnany, the White House press secretary, did yesterday try to back away from this, but a reporter told her this is on tape. And I think that that is what will make this story stick to him a little bit more aggressively than perhaps some of these other stories that we've heard about him. There were also legitimate questions raised in the White House press briefing yesterday about why the president would sit down for 18 interviews with someone for a book, particularly at a time when he also told the journalists that he didn't have time, per se, to sit down with perhaps Fauci because of the coronavirus. So there are lots of questions about how the 18 interviews came about. There was some blame cast on South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham for encouraging President Trump to do these interviews. But again, questions being raised about why the President of the United States would sit down for 18 of these interviews, even so.
Yeah, over the course of 9 hours in particular. Yeah, really interesting thought there, Francesca. The other thing that's is interesting here is Bob Woodward is getting a lot of pushback from people who say, listen, if you knew back in February about President Trump's remarks on this, why didn't you sound the alarms earlier on? Now, we're going to learn more in his interview in 60 Minutes, but he did tell the Washington Post about that interview in February. He said, the biggest problem I had, which is always a problem with Trump, is I didn't know if it was true. Do you feel like that's going to be enough for those doubters out there that say Bob Woodward should have sounded the alarms earlier on about this?
Well, he also said to Washington Post, or perhaps it was another interviewer, but he also noted that he's not in the position of writing daily articles. He was trying to put the comments that President Trump made about the coronavirus in a larger context and give a fuller account of what he said and how he did it during the coronavirus pandemic.
Yeah, very good point. All right, let's switch gears. I want to talk about the Senate. Two sides are really deadlocked here when it comes to the latest of the relief package here on the coronavirus. Any progress that we might be getting on this? We know the Senate potentially is going to be voting on this here very soon. What sort of progress will we get on this, and will we even get a deal?
Even with the skinny bill that the Senate is looking at, we're essentially where we were before recess, which is that there is no deal between Republicans and Democrats in the House and the Senate. In the House, Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker, has said that she does not want a skinny bill at all. They have their priorities. They've set their number at $2.2 trillion. They don't seem to be backing away from that number, regardless of what's being proposed in the United States Senate. And now senators are facing another very real situation where even though they will be in Washington for several weeks this month, they will have to go back to their districts in October. And it's not as if there will be a serious consideration at that point in order to keep senators around, given that there are elections coming up in November. Mitch McConnell is also on the ballot, so he is certainly not someone who wants to be stuck in Washington for another month either. So they could find themselves going back home, at least those who are up for re-election, empty-handed and having to face the voters.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because Mitch McConnell was telling reporters yesterday he was sort of hoping that this would help those endangered Republicans, mainly the Martha McSallys, the Cory Gardners out there who are in tough re-election battles. At least they would have this vote to go back to their constituents on. Do you feel like that is a good political move for Mitch McConnell, given the fact that probably we need more money, more trillions of dollars of stimulus into the markets than what Republican skinny bill is actually offering here?
It's always unclear whether or not taking a vote on something to have that vote down, how much that helps lawmakers, because that's to your point, if you are an American voter and you've been negatively affected or impacted by the coronavirus, economically even, but also health-wise, how much it really would mean to take a vote on something versus having that relief, even if it isn't the relief that at the level that you would have wanted it and all the things that you wanted.
All right, Francesca, I want to talk about the election. It's interesting now, President Trump's potential path to 270 electoral votes, a little bit different than what he had in 2016, mainly because Minnesota could be a potential state that's in play for him right now. By the way, a lot of prognosticators like the Cook Political Report still think at the end of the day Joe Biden might win Minnesota. But what is it in the wins that are happening right now in Minnesota that makes President Trump think he can win that state?
So Minnesota is a state that President Trump only lost by roughly 44,000 votes. Let me put that in context for you. That is roughly how much that he won Pennsylvania by. And he won Pennsylvania by a more sizable margin than even Michigan. So if you're looking at that corridor of the blue collar states, the Trump campaign has taken the approach that might as well throw Minnesota in there too, because he would have to win both states, all those states really, by similar margins in order to be victorious in the election. And if he were able to win Minnesota, the president would also be able to potentially drop another state like Arizona, or even one of those Wisconsins or Michigans where the vote was relatively narrow last time, and still be able to win. So I see it less as it's now in play, as the Trump campaign has had to put it in play in order to potentially make up for one of these other states that he won in 2016 that he may just not be able to win in 2020.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting because, Bill Stepien, the campaign manager, says we only need 270. He got more than 270 in 2016. That's all you need to get into the Oval Office. So, if he pulls off Minnesota, that changes the dynamic of where the race is at. And you mentioned Wisconsin. That, of course, is a state that we got some polling yesterday. Joe Biden ahead in the new Marquette poll out there. But we're also seeing some numbers where that law and order message from President Trump not resonating as much as I'm sure he would want in a state like like a state like Wisconsin. Is it because Joe Biden was able to successfully blunt that message in Wisconsin? Why hasn't President Trump's law and order message done better in a place like Kenosha?
And these states were always expected to be close. We know that polling always tightens as you get closer to an election and more people start to tune in. But as you noted, the difficulty for a campaign is perhaps a message that they had been using all summer when maybe fewer people were tuned into politics. You suddenly get to the fall, and if that does not resonate, it's very difficult at that point to start changing course. But there are a number of reasons why President Trump and Joe Biden could be so close in Wisconsin. We just started the segment by talking about some of these revelations that have appeared in different articles and books that are coming out. We've also talked today about the pandemic and the president's response to it. So there are a number of reasons why people in these particular states might just be not buying it.
Yeah, very good point. Francesca Chambers, White House correspondent at McClatchy DC. Great to have you here. Thanks for getting up early with us.